at least most of this session will be put up on Canvas through a YouTube link, as I did with the other two lectures. So I'm going to jump back to the PowerPoint and see that we've covered that. So the question there was, do you have enough money to hire and move forward with an actual hire? And what do you expect that person to do? So one of the things we should talk about is before hiring somebody, it's very important to know what exactly you want them to do. If you hire somebody and they mill about not sure what to do, not only are you going to be upset and broker, but they are going to be dissatisfied with their job. So knowing what is expected of somebody, what they're expected to do, and letting them know that are very important to you. Ultimately, if you decided that someone was going to take over that position of painter for me, the job duties might include verifying that they have an adequate inventory of paints and asking for more to be ordered before it's gone. Might be that you must maintain the cleanliness of the paint guns, the paint booth, any materials that you might need. It would certainly include doing your own assessment of your painting to make sure that there's nothing wrong. Knowing that maybe there's some orange peel or some flaking or some incomplete coverage before someone else finds it, so that you can take corrective action beforehand. So the job duties, in addition to just painting product, might include all of the aspects, and defining them well enough will be helpful. Certainly, there's some skills needed for a painter, but there's skills needed for most jobs. Does the person you're hiring have those skills, or do they need to be trained? In all likelihood, training will be needed because you may ask for someone to paint in a way that they're not used to. In particular, if you're working in a military environment, the effort regarding painting is much different than in a private sector job. You may be required to check viscosity of the paint, make sure it's within date because some paints will expire, make sure that it meets the right military specs, and so on. And so training in those other aspects may become needed even if somebody's been painting cars at Mako for a very, very long time. Obviously, when you hire somebody, if they need tools, you need to have them available. You don't want to bring somebody in that needs to be able to get on email and communicate with customers, and they show up on day one, and day 5 is when their phone and laptop show up. So knowing that you're going to hire somebody, make sure that you already have the resources they will need in hand. And as was noted in the prior video, make sure that there's money enough in the budget to actually add somebody. It's unfortunate for everybody if you bring somebody in only to find out in 4 weeks or 8 weeks that this isn't going to financially be manageable, and that person now has learned your systems, probably just about getting good at it. You've spent all that time and resources training them, only to find out that you can't afford it. So obviously checking what money is in the budget becomes important. Now, one of the things that the IRS in particular makes a distinction between is what is considered an employee versus what is considered an independent contractor. It's very tempting to have everybody that helps you be an independent contractor because they then are responsible for their own taxes. As an employer, you are responsible for withholding taxes, paying unemployment taxes, things of that nature that an independent contractor won't do. So there are some strict rules and some actual actions that get taken from time to time. I can tell you when I bought one of my companies, the prior owners had laid everybody off 3 months earlier and then hired them back as independent contractors. Not legally, I'll let you know. So that about 9 months into having taken over this company, I got hit with all sorts of back payroll tax for at least one of the employees that the prior owners had kind of skirted. That was not comfortable. I did survive, but it was not the way it should have been. So now I'm going to go back over to the first of the videos after I can see it.
Let's say your business is growing and you need help. You're ready to hire. When I hired my first employee, like most small businesses, it wasn't an employee at all. It was an independent contractor. But what's the difference, and does it really matter? Well, in the eyes of the law, it matters, and there is a difference. So you need to acquaint yourself with at least the basics of an employee's legal status. Why do most small businesses start by using independent contractors? Lots of reasons. The biggest, you don't have to pay payroll taxes. But you also have a lot more flexibility. You use them when you need them, but when you don't, you're not continuing to pay salary. Another reason is that you can find independent contractors that have special skills that you might not be able to afford in a full-time employee, like a web designer or lawyer or a marketing specialist. Then it makes sense. But just because you want to have someone as an independent contractor doesn't mean it's always the best idea or a legal idea. Remember, an employee works for you on your terms. They show up at the office, restaurant, or plant at the times you tell them to and work the hours you tell them to. There's a lot more control. They're also likely to be more loyal and see their future with you in a way that an independent contractor won't. But on top of all that, you don't necessarily get the choice. The IRS is very finicky about the determination between the classification of an employee versus an independent contractor. The IRS and state labor agencies aggressively pursue companies that intentionally or unintentionally classify employees as independent contractors. And the penalties are steep, back taxes as well as fines and penalties. Even large companies have been caught doing this. So it's important to know the difference between independent contractors and employees. In the long run, you'll use both. I do. If you're ready to hire either an employee or an independent contractor, you can get a free copy of my...
I did change the screen on my end. Did that change it for you relative to that video?
It was very blurry.
Yeah, that whole video is kind of blurry, actually. Okay. So she made some distinctions on when you have an employee versus an independent contractor. In particular, the way the state and the federal government look at that is if you tell a person when you need them to do something. I don't mean telling a plumber to come to your house between 8 and 12 in the morning to fix something. I mean, if you have somebody coming into your facility and, let's say, painting the parts for you, and you tell them you're going to be there every day from 8 until 12, and you're going to use my tools, now you've gone over the line from independent contractor into employee. An independent contractor always retains the right to say, you know, I'm not going to be there on Thursday, at least not at 8 a.m., but I can be there in the afternoon. Will that be okay? And the independent contractor will bring their own tools. That isn't to say that they might not use tools that you have on hand as needed, but generally speaking, they are a traveling shop. In terms of our first employee, there's some guidance here that may be helpful.
Hiring your first employees is really key in developing your company and going from a small company to a mid-sized company and beyond. So how do you hire those first employees, tactically speaking? First, you really want to write down specifically what you do and what your new hire will be expected to do. You can't expect that your new hire will wear as many hats as you do. You're the entrepreneur, that's your job. But you want to be very specific about what your expectations are for your first hire. Second, you want to go to your state's website on hiring and find out all the requirements. Tactically speaking, you have to do this. Now, if you make a mistake, you don't need to stress about it because you can always fix that mistake. But try to get as much knowledge as you can from your state and federal sites to get hiring requirements out of the way. Third, use your friends and networks, but don't hire your friends. So it's important to find really well-qualified prospects, and some of the best recommendations can come from your friends and your business networks. It is tricky to work with friends, however, because that does change the nature of your friendship. Fourth, you want to check and double check your future cash flows. Making that first hire can feel like you're making another gigantic leap, just like it felt when you were starting your company. So you want to make sure that you're not going to be having a difficult talk about letting that person go in 6 months. Fifth, you want to include a detailed offer letter spelling out salary, spelling out expectations for your employee, and include the state and federal forms that you've located on your state website in this hiring packet. And then take that and make that into your hiring packet for future hires. So if you follow these steps, then hiring that first employee won't be too daunting, and certainly hiring the second, third, and so on will be a much easier process.
He kind of snuck in this concept of hiring your friends. There definitely is a downside to having people work for you that have known you from other endeavors. Occasionally you have to have disciplinary discussions, and it gets more difficult with friends than with employees. Also, when you have a friend who's working for you and you have other employees that aren't your friends, they kind of notice it, and it becomes, a barrier to the relationships all around. They will choose what they can and can't say to your friend because they're worried about your friend saying something to you. In terms of working with people, as in you have a partner in your business and he is your friend, that's probably different. Although many, many businesses end in business divorce, if you will, to the same degree that marriages end in divorces. You have a difference of opinion, you can't resolve it. It breaks not only a friendship, but a business. Now, on to supervising employees. Honestly, employees can definitely be great. They can look out for you, they can take care of your product, your customers, your money, or they can be a pain. My employees that get to work before me and open the place up and clean up after themselves and look for something to do, those are all very helpful to me. When I end up with employees that call out, as in don't show up to work on a Monday morning several times in a row, or especially the ones that don't bother telling me they're not coming in, that's very, very difficult on a supervisor, manager, or owner. You're making commitments to your customers based on a certain amount of work hours that you expect. And when someone doesn't show up, somehow it's got to be dealt with. Right now, I've got one employee who is older than me, but his parents are much older and he's taking care of them. It's the right thing to do, but if I take 1 out of 4 people out of the shop, I'm the one who gets to pick up the slack, which then makes it, of course, hard to go get that additional business that is needed. You also have employees that will gossip, they will do a bad job, not necessarily on purpose, although I've had some of that in the past. And that becomes very, very difficult as a supervisor. How, in fact, you react to these things can make it better or make it worse. Sometimes people will very carefully try to bring up subjects instead of just say, listen, I really need you to fix this problem. So if an employee can't see well, and seeing is important to their job, it's one thing to ask, where are your glasses, or why don't you wear glasses? It's another to say, hey, I got to get my eyes checked. You want to go with me? Let's go get some glasses, because I see you're having trouble identifying this particular kind of defect. Do you know what you're looking for, or can you not just see it? If you are working with employees, especially if you are disciplining them, you really want to do that one-on-one. You don't want to discipline your employees in front of everybody, because that ends up creating a whole nother barrier in a relationship. If you praise somebody in public, that's also very helpful. The one thing to remember is you get more of the behavior you reward. If you reward good performance, you're likely to get more good performance. If you discipline people in public, the opposite will happen. So if we have employees and there are some kinds of problems, one of our keys is to be very detailed on what, in fact, the job is, or what, in fact, the output needs to be. So if our painter, if the output that is required by the job is a finish without defects, and all of those defects are defined and understood, a paint area that is clean enough that the materials from one job won't contaminate the next job, and that you're getting through 3 or 4 or 5 jobs a day, those are all details on what is expected. Without that, you may have an employee that gets through 1 job a day and think they're doing great, but all you see is the work backing up. So detail what is expected. What are the organization's goals? Are we expecting to get 5 jobs a day painted? And if there are more than 5 jobs a day, we start to need additional help. In terms of detail, we already talked a little bit about what that employee's responsibilities are, making sure that they are understood and accepted being kind of a critical key. You may tell an employee that he's the one that has to stop at Home Depot and pick up paint if he's running out. Well, maybe that's not something he's accepted, but it's something you've given. So you need to make sure that that employee is capable of doing the jobs and parts of the jobs that are being asked of them. In terms of what we expect, again, how many jobs a day might we expect to complete? What quality expectations are there? Are we looking for ways to save money? Are they trying to make sure that they are always wearing their safety equipment? All of those fall into part of the detail that you would share with such an employee. The ability to critique somebody is very important to you as a supervisor, manager, or owner. Being able to measure, in fact, how well someone is doing will help you to manage that person. So, for example, for that employee that has been doing 3 jobs a day when you need 5, the performance measurement is clear. On average, you're getting only 3 jobs done and we need you to get 5. So let's work on together what's causing you to only get 3 done. Sometimes that work on together really is a way to soften the requirement and let that employee save face and try to improve. If in fact there is a consistent defect that the employee has been made aware of, then your performance measurement might be how many this week versus last week versus a week before, is it trending properly? In all cases, you need to pay attention to why, what outside influences might be going on that prevent that employee from achieving those goals. If in fact you gave them a paint gun that is simply terrible, they should be telling you that right away, first of all. But if they don't understand that it's doing something wrong and giving them a poor paint job, then that's something that you will need to figure out. We are talking about things that an employee can control as opposed to things that are out of their control. You guys are going to love this when they happen if you haven't already had it. But performance reviews in, I want to say larger companies, because I don't really do performance reviews with my employees in a small company. I will take action with them on specific topics or tasks, but I don't have a sit-down review of their performance on a periodic basis. But larger companies frequently do. And so during a performance review, the result of, or the output of a performance review is going to impact the raise or raises that different employees get. So if you have, excuse me, commonly a company that will dictate, we have 3% payroll raise available this year. As a supervisor, as a manager, you then have the discretion to give one employee a 2% raise and one a 4% raise, and affect subtle differences in that, how that employee benefits, if he's doing well or not well. Performance reviews also play into promotions. Many times performance reviews will include a discussion on where do you want to be in 1 year or 5 years, kind of like an interview question. And if your goal is to go from being an engineer to being the engineering manager to being the vice president of research and development, there are steps that you can define with that employee during a performance review, things they might need to learn, things that they might need to get better at, things that they could be doing now to work on their promotability. And that's generally something that gets documented in performance reviews. During performance reviews, you probably also need to look at the possibility of disciplining people. If, for example, every week or every 2 weeks, your employee has been out sick on the same Monday morning, well, first of all, you will have discussed that with him before, but you're certainly going to bring that up and let that employee know how that impacts the business, how that impacts your ability to do your work and other people. And it might be the time where you talk again about what in fact must occur for that employee to continue to be employed. Now, I temper this by saying one of the things that frequently happens is that managers and supervisors will remember the bad things but have never talked about them before. So when you're doing a review with somebody, it's really not fair to go back in time and say, you know, remember that week in September when you were late 4 days in a row? That really was a problem for me. Well, it's not appropriate to do that in March. It's appropriate to do that in September when it's occurring, to try to figure out what's going on and make sure you reiterate to that employee the importance of being on time. So the next video is kind of fun. We're going to move over to it and see. All right, here we go.
So that was my weekend, nothing special. What about you? You seem rather chipper for a Monday.
Today is a good day. It's my performance review.
Wait a minute. You're excited about the performance review?
My next meeting is a one-on-one. I have to deliver a performance review.
That's not necessarily a bad thing.
It's with Matt.
Oh, I can see why you're so depressed.
Man, I'm stoked about this one. Because last time Melanie gave me kind of a bad review.
Last time I gave him an extremely negative review.
What exactly did she say?
You know, mumbo jumbo manager speak.
I couldn't have been more clear.
Like needing a little touch up here and there.
His appearance was sloppy, he was passive and unmotivated,
Maybe learn some more stuff.
and the quality of his work was completely substandard.
And we talked about my future.
I also said that I didn't see much of a future for him.
Dude, you have to read between the lines, but she was majorly hinting that I could go places.
I don't think he's going to make it to the end of the year anyway.
With a little spit and polish, no big deal. So that's what I did. Got myself some spit and polish. Buddy, you're looking at Mr. Improved.
If anything, he's gotten worse. I don't know which is more objectionable, his social deficiencies or his technical incompetencies.
I mean, I busted my hump this last year. I even took some night classes at the community college.
Well, I can see why you're so enthused about things.
It's more than that. I think I'll finally get that promotion I deserve. And believe me, with a new baby on the way, I could use all the cash I could get.
I'm putting Matt on probation, and that means no yearly bonus, but fortunately, I hear his wife has a good job.
Especially with my wife losing her job and all.
Sorry to hear about that, mate. Tell you what, you give me a call after the review and we'll celebrate over lunch or something.
Yay. Cheerio.
Well, call me for lunch later. I have a feeling you're going to need to take a break.
Well, Matt, are you ready?
You bet. Now, I'm jumping the gun a little bit here, I know. And maybe it's just nerves because my wife lost her job and all. But you'll see I deserve that promotion.
Promotion?
Yes. And I have you to thank. You know that little pep talk last time? And with being a new daddy and all. Anyway, I'm just so excited to hear what you have to say.
Facing a crucial conversation, Vital Smarts can help.
Honestly, I don't think anything can help there. In fact, that is not terribly uncommon. That's kind of an extreme video showing how those things sometimes go. But it is surprisingly common. You can think about your everyday conversation, how people misinterpret or interpret the way they want to those kinds of performance reviews. So again, one thing that you should avoid would be to not bring up things that happened a long time ago. They usually are things that you should have addressed at the time. Another thing to avoid is, I think you'd call it latest event syndrome. Let's say you have an employee that has been very good for most of the year. Something happened recently that you've addressed and they're addressing, but don't allow a single unusual event to destroy a whole year's worth of good support as an employee. It is kind of important to be level-headed when you're working with people. You never know what they're going through, what may be causing them to perform differently. So be prepared to talk to people about it. When you are addressing problems that you see, you really need to address those problems now when they happen or immediately after they happen, because waiting allows that behavior, that performance, to continue on in a way that is disruptive to your business. Certainly be very explicit about what is going on. What happened, when did it happen, where did it happen? You know, it could be as simple as, hey, you know, you told an off-color joke, we don't accept that behavior within our company, and you did that, yesterday with these people. You offended 2 people. We need you to stop that and make sure that you are not doing something inappropriate. Or it could be that discussion on coming to work late. You were late 3 times this week. Don't wait until 2 weeks from now to talk about it. We want to explain that expectation. We expect you to work on time. We expect you not to tell jokes that are offensive. And you can explain why as you go along. It's important that you come to work on time. It's also expected that you come to work on time, because on time allows us to do the work as a team that we need to do. If you're going to monitor it, it's a little harder to monitor a bad joke, but in terms of people getting to work on time or reducing their defect rate, things of that nature, you have systems in place. You have a time clock, you have quality control perhaps, you have spot checks that you can do, but how will you make sure that that employee is meeting the expectation? What you want must be able to be verified. And sometimes the harder conversation involves what's going to happen if it continues. So for example, if you continue to be late for reasons that are unacceptable, then you're going to be disciplined through days off without pay, or ultimately being fired from the company. Many companies will ask you to document all of this. They're going to start with a policy where you have verbal warnings before they go through written warnings. And it's surprising how many have a first verbal warning, a second verbal warning, and then they start to document into personnel files. In fact, I would kind of advise against this in terms of how you discipline people. Go ahead and have those verbal discussions, but if they continue to exhibit the behavior that is not accepted, I would simply thank them for the service and tell them that their help is no longer needed. Quite often, if you document somebody is late, and finally fire them for being late, it's not uncommon for people to come back and try to get their job back by any legal means necessary and say that, well, in this situation, blah, 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 blah. And before you know it, the words that you use when you let someone go become fuel for their lawyers. So more commonly, when I let people go, I simply thank them for their help and offer them the opportunity of finding a new job. When it comes to developing the skills of your employees, is it your job as the supervisor, manager, owner, or is it the employee's job? I suspect, I think that in general, it's a common goal. Both have to participate. In terms of the tasks the company needs done, we've already decided that that's something we have to document in detail. And if it requires training, provide that training. Of course, the employee has to take that to heart also and become proficient in the tasks that are being requested. Who does it benefit? It actually benefits everybody, because the company now has an employee that's able to do the tasks that need to be done, but that employee has gained additional skills and become more valuable to you. It's not uncommon for an employee that can work in 2 different departments. Not only can they paint, but they can, run the maintenance, whatever it turns out to be. And so that employee becomes much more flexible and much more beneficial to you. So it benefits both the employee and the company. I think the last topic we're covering is delegation. And you'll hear yourself say this before it's all said and done, is that I might as well do it myself because it's going to take me too long to teach somebody how to do my job or do this job. But in reality, spending the time to train somebody, while it is difficult, it is time consuming, it becomes very important to your productivity, your ability to get more things done or things done that are more profitable to your company. So this topic is on, or this video is on delegation.
Making the job as easy as A, B, C, D. We all know you're quite amazing. Really, you're the best person to get the job done. The only problem is that they didn't make days long enough to fit in all the work you need to do. That's not your fault. And that's why you'll find that you occasionally, sometimes, maybe, need to delegate. It's difficult to let go, I understand. But I promise you, delegation is a good thing. And this is why. Delegating means bringing fresh talent and ideas to the table. And it helps you make sure you never let anyone down because you are under pressure. So why don't people delegate more often? There are several reasons, I'm sure, but the most common reason is that it takes a lot of effort up front. Completely understandable. Who has the time? By the time you've explained it all, you might as well have done it by yourself, correct? This simple AABCD technique will show you how delegation helps. A is for analysis, identifying tasks that can be delegated. For example, you've initialized a new service which you know will be a fantastic success for your business. Now all you need to do is create an email flyer to help promote it. What could be easier for you than writing the content? After all, you know the campaign inside out. You created it. So why waste time teaching someone else all about it? Here's why. When you are capable of coming up with a surefire campaign, is it really the best use of your time to be sitting around and writing? So get someone else to do it, while you get on with coming up with more genius ideas. The second A is for appointment, choosing the right delegate. You spend a little extra time teaching your delegate about this task. Meanwhile, they're developing the skills necessary to take on tasks like this in future, needing much less involvement from you. But you need to make sure they have the time and the basic skills in place to complete the task. Don't give this task to Barry, who you know can't write for toffee, or Simone, who's leaving in a month. After A comes B. B is for briefing, defining the task. Important to delegating is finding the time to train effectively. Make sure you give clear details on boundaries, deadlines, expectations, and goals. C is for control. Even though the task has been delegated, you'll still need to monitor the job, but keep in mind a few things. Your delegate may be slower than you at first. They may make errors until they know as much about the campaign as you do. They might have a different working method to yours, so focus on the outcome instead, and do remind them that you are there to help. D is for delivering feedback, the last and possibly the most crucial stage, as this is where many undo all their good work so far. Your delegate finished the flyer, but left out a couple of the key points of the campaign, and even the company logo. What do you do here? You take the project over and redo it so it's done properly. But while it's important to make sure the work is at the high standard you would produce, your delegate should be the one to make the corrections. So make sure you leave enough time to review and rectify. Otherwise, you'll be reluctant to delegate next time. At first, delegation might seem like more work than it's worth, but learn the AABCD technique and you'll save yourself so much more time in the long run, freeing you up to create new campaigns and make you even more successful than you are now with the hours you have available in any given day, which, let's face it, will probably still not be enough.
Okay, so that's everything for today, except let's go back over the fact that the lockdown browser is going to be used for exam number 2, and that exam is scheduled for our class time on Monday. That there is a practice exam currently available, or at least available in the next 10 minutes or so, that will give you up to 5 points added to your exam 2. I need you to go ahead and take that practice exam and make sure that your system is capable of meeting the requirements. And if it isn't, figuring out how to get to those requirements. I don't know yet on the question from Sydney whether or not the exam scores are going to be right away. I just haven't used this system yet. I know that when we get the exam, we might get the exam scores for the practice exam right away, and that'll tell us what's going on. Well, whether they squander your money or not, it's a question, but the exam will include the material from today. I'm going to stick around for some questions if you have them. So if nothing else, wash your hands and have a great week. In fact, all the quiz answers are available now, I believe. The only one potentially not is the one for today's material and Monday's material, which will be available toward the end of the week. I put the practice exam due by Saturday at midnight so that you can get that done and have a day to resolve any issues you might have. I'm not entirely sure how the camera on a cell phone works in this regard, but I have a feeling that if you know somebody, Stephen, that has a laptop for an hour, or actually probably less than a half hour in all likelihood, the normal test time isn't that long, you might be able to borrow. No, you won't be able to review answers on the exam before submitting. Everybody will have the same questions. I'm fairly confident they will come at you in a different order, and the answers will probably be shuffled around. Thank you, Kevin. If you look at the schedule on Canvas, it identifies specifically which chapters. I'm sure it's 8, 10, 9, plus the material that's called BB Blackboard, which should say C for Canvas now. I believe it will be set up like the quizzes. No notes during the exam, same as in-person exam. And I don't know if you can change your answers on the tests. I'll try to figure that out beforehand and make sure I communicate with everybody. there will be enough of the intellectual property material on the exam. It's probably 15% of the material we've covered since the last exam. So I wouldn't skimp on getting to understand it. In fact, I would pay attention to the fact that there is a section on trade secrets that we didn't cover during the live video, if you will. And so make sure you cover that material that is available on Canvas. I think in terms of Zoom, it's a good thing I'm perfectly happy sitting here looking stupid. Pretty much I get to do that a little bit today. All right, guys, last chance. If you're still here and have a question, ask it. Otherwise, talk to you Monday, or probably before then.